Good evening, baseball fans, and welcome to a trade deadline recap episode of the Big D podcast. Before I get into detail, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and voice reviews on the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. We've got a lot of content out, and we've got more on the way. Hopeful of getting a UFC 265 episode in this week, and you never know what will appear as the calendar soon flips from July to August. Hopefully, we've got some more exciting content as the NFL season is fast approaching. So, if you know me, you know I am a huge baseball fan. Been a baseball guy all my life, and the MLB trade deadline is one of those days that makes the sport relevant. No matter if you're 10 games up in the division or 10 games back, every team feels like they're improving, whether you're going for World Series, going for a pennant, or potentially getting the hot young prospects. Every team feels like they can improve with today, and some teams improve their chance of not just winning the division or pennant, but maybe the World Series, and others are building toward hopefully a brighter future. So now talking about all the deals that happened, and the 2021 MLB Trade Deadline was one of the craziest experiences I've ever seen. There were so many rumors, so many deals, and not just involving superstar players, but great process. I mean, there were first round picks just in last year's draft offered and shipped. Top 2, 3 picks rumored to be dealt in trades, and I think it's fascinating what general managers do because there was no minor league season last year. I think these teams are looking at prospects differently because a lot of these kids really didn't get a chance to play last year, and so we've seen that first round that prospects have been dealt in a couple cases and top prospects being dealt. So the big story was the LA Dodgers basically going all in again, and the LA Dodgers not only won this trade deadline, they probably won it for the past 4 or 5 years because the Max Scherzer-Trea Turner deal may be one of the biggest trade deadline moves we've ever seen because Dodgers got a future Hall of Famer, Max Scherzer, still pitching great into his mid-late 30s, started the All-Star game. K/9 rate still right where it usually is, but Scherzer brings an energy, he brings confidence, he brings that big personality. I think Scherzer will be just fine in LA. And I know people are saying, what about Trevor Bauer? Listen, the Dodgers may very well have gotten Max Scherzer, but they wouldn't have needed Max Scherzer without the Trevor Bauer news. Now, you got Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Julio Urias, Tony Gonsolin, and David Price. That's a pretty good rotation in regular season, and it might be better in October when it's a 3 or 4 man staff. And Trey Turner's no throw in this deal. In fact, if you ask me, I think he might be the centerpiece of this deal because Turner brings speed, power. I mean, yeah, he's an all-star shortstop, but potentially could play second or even in the outfield as he did really in his Nats career. So you get a number one starter and a speedy infielder, outfielder. And not to mention, the Dodgers also got Danny Duffy. So, yeah, he's on the DL with injury, but if he's healthy, he could be a super reliever, throw multiple innings, or potentially even start in the playoffs. The second big story today might be the breakup, not just of the 2016 Chicago Cubs, but of the 2019 Washington Nationals. I don't remember two teams dismantling a World Series roster faster than the Cubs, at least in recent time. I know the 98 Marlins might have something to say. But the Chicago Cubs and Washington Nationals all but gutted their roster. It's fitting because the Cubs and Nats are playing tonight in DC, and I hope the play-by-play announcers have got like name tags and like minor league numbers. Otherwise, otherwise they're gonna have fun at Nats Park tonight. So obviously, the Cubs winning the World Series 5 years ago broke the Cubs, the Billy Goat, but you knew the end was near. I think most realistic Cubs fans knew it was real. But it's still odd that Anthony Rizzo's in pinstripes tonight, that so many heroes from the past 4 or 5 years are gone. I mean, just today, Javi Baez went to the Mets. Chris Bryant, former NL Rookie of the Year, NL MVP, one of the most versatile players in the game, is a San Francisco Giant. That doesn't look right. That doesn't sound right. But for a Cubs fan, it might, because they got a chance to play in October when the Cubs never stood a chance of making the playoffs this year. And probably the biggest news of the day was about an hour or so before the deadline when the Cubs shipped Craig Kimbrell across town for interesting, the Chicago starting second baseman who's on the IL with a ruptured hamstring. It's wasn't surprising the Cubs dealt Kimbrel, but the fact Chicago got him when Leon Hendricks is a very good reliever in his own right stunned me. I thought for sure Kimbrel would have been either a Dodger, Padre, Brave, maybe a Ray, but Kimbrel staying in Chicago but going to the White Sox just makes that bullpen so deep. I mean, you've got Kimbrel and Hendricks, whoever closes, be nasty, and whether both of them close, one of them throws the seventh, one of them throws the eighth, would just seventh, eighth, or ninth would just make that bullpen so deep. I mean, then White Sox were already the favorite in the AL Central. Now they're probably the favorite in the American League playoffs because you have Lucas Giolito, Dallas Keuchel, Lance Lynn, Carlos Rodon, a lineup filled with power, speed, and all kinds of ability, and now two of the game's best relievers. Look out. And now back to the Nats. 4 times have changed. I remember it seems like yesterday the Nats winning the 2019 World Series. And now, 30% of that roster is gone or more. I mean, the Nats have traded so many guys, not just Scherzer, not just Turner, but Yan Gomes, Josh Harrison, Daniel Hudson, Kyle Schwarber. I mean, so many guys are gone. But in a way, the Nats were 7.5 back in the NL East. They're not going to make the playoffs in all likelihood. Max Scherzer in Milwaukee. They've tried for years, but likely wasn't signing a long-term extension there. So in a way, the Nats, they got a bevy of prospects. I mean, Ruiz is one of the best catching prospects in the game, and I think Washington said itself, well, they got a lot of money coming off the books, and potentially with maybe not a great starting pitching class, but Trevor Story, Javier Baez, and Corey Seager, Carlos Correa available next all season. You wonder if the Nats are going to play for one of the big shortstops. So now I want to break down trade deadline day or trade deadline week, day, whatever you call it, by division. First, I think we should start with the NL West. Obviously, the Dodgers, they got Max, Trea Turner, Danny Duffy, so they pretty much not only made themselves in the family in the West, but probably the big favorite repeat as world champs. The Giants, there were questions about what the Giants were doing because it seemed like the Giants would go quiet on deadline day, but they got Chris Ryan Chris Ryan in the fold, and there were rumors whether former number 2 overall pick Joey Balt would be in that trade, but he is not, and Brian will be a Giant. Brings power, so much experience, versatility. I mean, Brian could play first, third, and all 3 outfield positions, plus give the Giants more power. And the Giants have been a great story with leading the NL West, and Brian will give them a chance at holding ground. And at this time yesterday, I thought the San Diego Padres might get Max Scherzer. Unfortunately, he's heading just up the coast. But yeah, I mean, the Padres look like a wild card team, and probably not going to catch the Dodgers or Giants, but certainly look like a shoo-in for the playoffs. They got Frazier from the Pirates and Daniel Hudson from the Nats, who didn't get anybody from the Nats. And they also got Jake Morrison from the Padres. Excuse me, not from the Padres, before the deadline. So I think the Padres season will be determined by what happens in an NL wildcard game. They probably can't win the division, but I doubt anybody catches them. And then the D-backs, I mean, didn't really make a lot of moves. They did trade Escobar to the Brewers, so I mean, it's been a bad season in Arizona, but hopefully brighter times are ahead. And the Rockies, oh, they did trade Michael Givens, but what are you doing not trading Trevor Story today? What are you doing? What are you doing? You probably waited too long with Troy Tulowitzki. You probably waited too long before moving Nolan Arenado. And now, I mean, yeah, not only did you keep hold of Trevor Story, but you kept hold of John Gray. And yeah, the Rockies probably wanted more than a compensatory pick, which they would get for Story and Gray, but Trevor Story's not having a great year. You could have moved him 2 or 3 years ago where his value was much, much higher, and he could have brought you back a bevy of prospects. Instead, he might get you, the 35th, 36th pick in the draft. So, yeah. I don't know what the Rockies are doing. True, an interim GM in place, so things are always rocky in Denver. And the NL Central, I mean, the Braves needed a couple guys. I like some of the moves they made. I mean, getting Escobar, whether he plays second or third, he'll give the Brewers a much needed bat, particularly with Yelich on the COVID ILs. Also, they got Dan North from the Tigers. So obviously, Milwaukee's 3-headed monster of starters will be key. Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta, and Corbin Burns will be a key in October. The Reds got Michael Gibbons from the Rockies to bolster their bullpen. The Cubs, well, they might need name tags for the game at Nats Park tonight because other than Wilson Contreras and maybe Davies, most, if not all, the Cubs guys who were available are gone. I mean, look how different the team. I mean, I looked at the Cubs line tonight. It looks like a spring training line. And the Cards, well, they made a couple moves. I mean, not giving up. I mean, true, John West is not what he was, but we'll see what he's got left in the tank. It'll be interesting to see. And then the Pirates, well, trade Adam Frazier, but again, the question of the Pirates is, can they develop these young prospects and potentially make a run in a few years, because they're not close to winning a division title, contending in the playoffs. And then the NL East, well, the New York Mets needed to make a move. Watching the Mets play has been so frustrating at times this year, but I think this move is interesting. They got Javi Baez from the Cubs. Obviously, Baez is not going to be not in a great on base guy. He'll swing and miss way too much, but brings power, versatility. I mean, Baez played shortstop in Chicago, but and will temporarily play shortstop in Queens, but potentially play third and second, especially when Frankie Lindor comes off the DL. So, and the Mets needed something, especially with other NL East rivals making moves today. I mean, the Braves, good lord, the Braves added like a whole new outfield, getting Adam Duvall from the Marlins, Eddie Rosario from the Indians, and Jorge Soler from the Royals. And true, the Braves are not going to be winning any Gold Gloves, those three guys, but they needed more bats. And true, with Acuna out for the year, many people thought the Braves would have remained quiet on deadline day, but they are going for it. And the Phillies made an interesting move with the Rangers getting Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy in a package for Spencer Howard. And just last year, I thought Spencer Howard would have been one of the best young pitchers in baseball. True, this year hasn't gone well, but we'll see what Howard can do in Arlington. And in the short term, Kennedy and Gibson can give the Phillies much needed help in their rotation and bullpen. So we'll see what happens there. And then the Marlins, well, they made one of the most interesting moves a couple days before the deadline, trading Starling Marte, but getting Jesus Luzardo. I mean, Luzardo brings all kinds of potential. I mean, sure, this year has been awful for him, but Luzardo has got potential. And the Marlins have added so much young pitching in the last few years. I'm excited to see what these young Marlins starters could do. Maybe they trade one of them for a bat this winter. So things will get interesting. Now in the AL, starting with the AL West and the Oakland Athletics, they added Starling Marte from the Marlins. Whether he plays center or corner, he'll give them speed, a little bit of power. He can play in a big ballpark. So, and the A's will have a very interesting outfit. I'm intrigued with Marte and potentially Loriano out there. And they also added Yan Gomes and Josh Harrison from the Nats. And a couple more guys. I'm intrigued to see Harrison, particularly against the lefty. And the Yan Gomes will help with catches. So the A's, as usual, were busy on deadline day. And the Astros, right up against the competitive balance tax threshold, added a trio of relievers. I mean, Houston will be a threat. Whether they play in the wild card playing game or potentially win the AL West, the Astros are dangerous. They've got so much experience. I mean, any team that could have Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, and Carlos Correa will be a threat in October. And the Mariners today, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to say. I mean, the Kendall Graveman trade befuddled me because he was making what, just over $1 million. I mean, not only did you trade him when you were playing great baseball, but you moved him to a division rival. Befuddles me. You usually don't trade a wanted piece within the division, but I'm not Jerry Dipoto. I mean, he makes trades. I mean, not today maybe, but some Mariner fans may be wondering why the Mariners didn't add a bat, potentially a piece. I mean, yeah, Dave Castillo's a nice piece, throws 98-mile-an-hour sinkers, but I think Seattle fans could have an argument on whether or not the Mariners should have been more aggressive on deadline day. The Angels, well, I think the big question with the Angels is when is Mike Trout coming back? Hopefully soon, but Ohtani's pitching and hitting great right now, and I know people may say, well, they traded Andrew Heaney. I mean, he's not having a great year, and I think the Angels may feel like the pitchers at AAA could be decent enough, and if they get on a run, maybe make it into the last playoff spot. And the Rangers, well, I mean, you trade arguably your franchise player in Joey Gallo. You also dealt Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy, but I like some of these prospects got back from the Yankees and Phillies, so we'll see what happens. I mean, the Rangers need energy, especially in that new ballpark. So we'll see what happens. And speaking of energy, how about the White Sox before deadline day? I mean, they got Tepera from the Cubs, Cesar Hernandez from the Indians, and the biggest splash for Craig Kimbrel. Obviously, whether he's closing or throwing the seventh, eighth inning, Craig Kimbrel hasn't looked this good since leaving Atlanta. I mean, that fastball slider combination has been great for Kimbrel this year, and the fact he doesn't have to move city, but will be in a pennant race, might make him even more dominant. I would hate to face Craig Kimbrel when he's pitching this well. Look out. And then the Indians, well, they sold off a couple key pieces. Cesar Hernandez. I mean, this is not the Indians here. This is not the Indians here. I mean, hopefully Terry Francona gets back soon, and we need you back in the dugout, Tito. And the Twins, well, they made one of the biggest sell-offs of this deadline day with Jose Barrios, but got a top 5 pick in last year's draft from the Blue Jays, Austin Martin from Vanderbilt. I really like Martin. I think he's got a lot of potential and brings another speed, power guy, fits in well with the Twins, so we'll see what happens there. The Royals, well, they traded Danny Duffy and Jorge Soler. Again, the Royals are not really contending this year. They're more building for the future, so we'll see what happens there. Same with the Tigers. Even the Detroit's played much better baseball lately. AJ Hinch has got the Tigers playing well right now, so we'll see what happens. And then finally in the AL East, I'm a little bit surprised the Boston Red Sox didn't add more pitching. I mean, Hanson Robles could fit the bullpen, but I thought the Red Sox would have added a reliever, at least a starter, if not one more reliever, whether that would have been Max Scherzer, Barrios, Gibson, or any of these guys. I mean, yeah, Chris Sale should be back from Tommy John sometime in August, so if Sale's more like he was 3 or 4 years ago, he could work like a de facto trade deadline move. If not, the Red Sox might be hurting in October. And then the Rays, well, they needed a big stick and got a boomstick in Nelly Cruz. And yeah, Nelson Cruz might be, 40, 41 years old, but I'll take his bat in my lineup. And I think the big question of the Rays is, can that pitching stay healthy? And what kind of leadership and mentorship will Nelly Cruz bring for that young team? And the Yankees, well, they needed left-handed bats and left-handed arms, and got both. I mean, first off, Joey Gallo fits Yankee Stadium almost too well. Power-wise, he can bring versatility, whether he plays left, center, or right. He will make that Yankee team far more athletic. I mean, be honest, watching the Yankees play this year, it's been boring because the Yankees have not produced much energy. Gallo was a Gold Glove winner last year. Can hit the ball out of the ballpark. I mean, he had 25 home runs. Gallo had 25 home runs, like 24, 25 home runs this year, playing half his games in Arlington, which is a pitcher's ballpark now. So, I mean, you imagine a 315-foot missile going over the wall in Yankee Stadium. Well, Joey Gallo's going to love that new short right field porch. And what seemed like an odd trade, but now makes more sense, was the Yankees getting Anthony Rizzo from the Cubs. I mean, seeing Anthony Rizzo in pinstripes will be odd, but the Yankees had not gotten anything out of left-hand hitters. If you look at the Yankees stats, left-handed hitting stats this year, they're abysmal. And sure, Rizzo may not be what he was 3 or 4 years ago, but get him in a pennant race, get him in a hitter's ballpark, and get him with Aaron Judge, Joey Gallo, Giancarlo Stanton, DJ LeMahieu, might get Anthony Rizzo feeling better. And also, the Yankees got Andrew Heaney. Now, true, he's not having the best year, but just given the Yankees' depth, I mean, who wants to face the Yankees in a one-game playoff with Garrett Cole pitching? Just saying, Garrett Cole could have won 2 of the last three Cy Youngs. He's pretty decent. And then the Blue Jays made a fascinating trade getting Jose Barrios from the Twins. True, the Blue Jays are right on the edge of playoff contention. I think they're a couple games, they're like 1 or 2 games behind the Yankees, but they're not really in the second wild card hunt. But to me, the Barrios move was more about next year because the Blue Jays control for 2 pennant races. And I think getting Barrios shows that the Blue Jays are not just going to be aggressive with position players, but pitching. Because the Blue Jays often run differential this year is amazing. They've got like a plus 97 run differential, but yet the Yankees have got a better record. I mean, and in a way, part of the Blue Jays' problem this year has been a lack of consistent starting pitching. And Barrios is a proven major league commodity. You can give them length, give them a number 1, number 2 starter. So I'm excited to see what he does. No, true, the Blue Jays paid a price. I mean, Austin Morgan's a top 20 prospect, was a top 5 pick in last year's draft, and will be missed. But if there's a team that could trade Austin Morgan, the Blue Jays could, with Vladdy Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, Marcus Semien, George Springer, Teoscar Hernandez, and Randall Grichuk. And then the Orioles, well, can we see the young catcher in the big leagues? Can we see that number 1 pick? So that's it for my MLB Trade Deadline recap episode. If you love this episode, please like it, and we'll get back to you soon.